It certainly wasn't easy on Saturday night, and now it doesn't look like it's going to be easy much of the rest of 2023. Welcome into the Voice of College Football and our Hawkeyes live show that we present each and every Tuesday, 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 where it counts. Corey Bradda from the Hawkeye of the Storm, of course, here to make it all go. Corey, how you doing today?
Doing good, man. How are you?
I am doing well, and I got to say, I openly, verbally chuckled when Cooper DeJean caught that ball and started to zigzag and find the blocks. And I just actually read a description and a couple of quotes from him basically saying, hey, we studied their formations. We knew we could block it. And Jay Higgins made a comment, hey, when Cooper's got the ball, number 3 catches it in open space, it's usually good things for the Hawkeyes. But I openly chuckled because I thought, here we go. Yeah. Number 1, their special teams has won the game. Number 2, there's still in a normal football game, plenty of time left, 3:45, whatever the time was, but they're not losing this game. Their defense is not going to give up a touchdown. The game's over.
Yep.
And there we go.
Yeah, and let's not forget you brought up special teams. Drew Stevens was phenomenal on Saturday. 4 for 4, made a 53-yarder, maybe overshadowed a bit by Michigan State kicker who made a 58-yarder at the end of the first half. But, I mean, that 53-yarder was huge, and Drew was called on a lot. So, yeah, no, you're exactly right. What's ironic about Iowa defense this year is through the first 4 games, they were, like, at the bottom of the Big Ten in takeaways, which is something you never see. I mean, Iowa just the way they play and Phil Parker's guys, they're just constantly creating, especially interceptions. And I think teams have scouted Iowa differently and approached that Iowa defense differently. A lot of dinking and dunking and really just keeping the ball out of harm's way, if you will, and kind of trying to nickel and dime Iowa to death, which we've seen teams do in the past. But typically Iowa still finds a way to create those picks. They're just so disciplined that eventually they strike. And we finally saw that happen Saturday. I mean, how many turnovers did Iowa have? 4 forced turnovers, I believe, in the game. Cooper had just an incredible pick. I thought that was just an unbelievable pick in the end zone on the double move. I mean, he wasn't even looking at the defender. If you don't know who threw the ball, you'd actually think Cooper was playing receiver for Michigan State, because just a great break on the ball by the defender, by Cooper DeJean in the back of the end zone, got the 1 foot down. That was a huge play, right? I mean, that took at least 3 points off the board and maybe more. It was one-on-one coverage. And again, Cooper came through with the goods on that one. And then, of course, like you said, the punt return for a touchdown. And I wouldn't say I had lost trust in Cooper DeJean on punt return duties this year, but he's been pretty quiet. He hasn't had a lot of opportunity, a lot of space. But boy, he just shows how electric he is. And of course, the conversation piece got brought up today with Kirk Ferentz at his weekly press conference, the idea of using Cooper DeJean on offense. And Kirk didn't shut it down, but it's likely not going to happen. I mean, I know there was discussion, and Kirk kind of acknowledged that today. There were discussions in the offseason, especially prior to Cade McNamara committing. There were discussions of potentially experimenting with that. So now that Cade is out, maybe that happens. I certainly would not bet the farm on it. I don't think that's likely to happen given the reputation of this coaching staff. But Kirk's right about one thing. He is a generational player, and he made a comment that I thought was a pretty honest but accurate description. He would be special on almost any team because, like, he's athletically, he's got a lot of speed. He's going to be, whenever he decides to leave for the NFL, he's going to be a high draft pick. But the other thing about him is he's so smart, and he just carries himself in a way that is so Iowa-like. I mean, he's from the small town of Odebolt, Iowa, and he's just a typical Iowa kid, but he's got that extra gear of athleticism that a lot of Iowa guys don't have. You know, like a Seth Benson. I know he's with South Dakota, but a Midwest guy like Seth Benson, that's kind of your typical Iowa athlete. Maybe doesn't have great explosiveness, great physicality or metrics, but boy, is just a solid football player. Cooper's a solid football player, but has the athleticism to be just great. And so, no, Saturday was not pretty. Cade McNamara's done for the year. It was official today, and we kind of knew. I mean, I was told that after the game on Saturday, and I mentioned that during the postgame show that I'd been told he had a tore ACL and that he was going to be out for the year. But, of course, you don't know that until MRIs are officially done. And of course, those have been done. Iowa releasing that information through Kirk Ferentz in the presser today. I guess the good news is that he did indicate that Cade McNamara plans to return next year. So, we've got a lot of season left this year, but I'm already kind of looking forward and thinking, what happens with the quarterback position next year? Is it just Cade McNamara's position? Is it just his job? Or what if Deacon Hill has a really good finish to the year? Is there an open competition? Marco Linez is a year older. You've got James Reesar coming in next year. So anyways, that's a discussion for a different day. And of course, we don't know what's going to happen with Joe Labus. But a lot of positivity from the fan base regarding Deacon Hill after the game. And they were more positive than I was. I like Deacon Hill. Seems like a great kid. We've talked about his size and whether that's a good or a bad thing. Most fans seem to think it's a good thing. So I hope that that's a steady viewpoint throughout the rest of the year. Because if it's not, then I would say that's because of things that have occurred on the field. But his weight, his size was not exposed on Saturday necessarily. There was a play where LaShawn Williams coughed it up and it ended up being a scoop and score. Ball got popped out, went right to a defender's arms, and he took it back for 6. If Deacon is, maybe Cade McNamara catches him, although Cade with the gimpy leg probably doesn't. But so I don't know. He's got a big arm. There have been some comparisons made already to a guy like Nate Stanley because of his size. He's bigger than Nate was girth-wise. I think Nate was probably a little taller. He's got a big arm. We saw that Saturday, and I thought he played okay. I thought he looked okay. I will say this. I tend to agree with, and this is purely speculation because we have no way to test this out, but I think I agree with the take by some fans that I would rather have a fully healthy Deacon Hill than a gimpy Cade McNamara. And what we saw the first 4 weeks of the year was a gimpy Cade McNamara. And I know you look at the stats, Cade's stats were bad. He was not healthy. He has not been healthy all year. And I feel for him, but this is why I advocated back in week 3 to shut him down. And again, I'm not part of that medical staff. I don't know if that would have done anything, but Don Patterson made a great point on the postgame show on Saturday. When you are hurt and not at 100% athleticism, you're more liable for injury. So I'm not saying that this wouldn't have happened had he been shut down week 3. We don't know that. But the point is he's done now. So it's Deacon Hill as the starter. Joe Labus is the backup. At least now they have a guy in Joe who's played. He played the entire Kentucky game, so that's a positive. At least they have a backup now with game experience. But it will be interesting to see how they utilize it. If we see a difference in play calling, that was brought up today. Somebody made a comment. I almost kind of chuckled when I heard it because it's an accurate comment to an extent. But somebody said, "Does this change your play calling now, Kirk, with this aspect of mobility?" And I kind of laughed. I'm like, "Whoa, what?" But the comment, I guess, is kind of true because I think he probably is more mobile than what Cade was with that quad issue. And even though he's not, believe me, he ain't Brad Banks, he's not Drew Tate. We saw him on some rollouts on Saturday, and hopefully that will inspire some level of confidence in Brian Ferentz to have some play calling like maybe we saw in 2017, 2018 when Iowa did have some games where they scored a lot of points and created some big plays. I think back to 2017, the game against Iowa State, the game against Ohio State. Brian has proven that he can call good games, and he did that with a big quarterback that wasn't real mobile but had a big arm. And potentially that's what we have with Deacon Hill. So we'll see. Kirk was very complimentary of Deacon and his ability to pick up the playbook and understand signals and calls. And so now we'll just see. This is a tough Purdue team. He mentioned that. I mean, obviously, Ryan Walters is a defensive guy. They are going to make it hard on Iowa's run game. It's going to be hard to protect Deacon. I don't know how similar. I mean, I have not studied their defense, but I get the feel that they're going to kind of be unpredictable, hard to kind of figure out where pressure is coming from at times. And I just think it's going to be we're going to learn a lot this Saturday about Deacon Hill. And it's a good thing it's at home, but it's going to be a challenge to win. Purdue looked really good against Illinois.
Yeah, they did. So in response to a number of things that you said there, first of all, if that particular player, whomever it is, Deacon Hill, is going through strength and conditioning and the nutritional program and basically what they have laid out for the players, and this is who he is, and this is his body type, then I don't have any issue with that.
No,
People are
I don't either.
built differently.
I'm concerned. I've said it from the beginning. I'm concerned with the weight. And I don't really need to keep saying that every week. I'm concerned with his weight because 260 is just a heavy quarterback. But concern is different than worry. And based on what I saw Saturday, he moves okay for a guy his size. He doesn't move great. He moves okay. And let's be honest, they haven't had a guy. He's probably, this is what's crazy, Mark. 260 pounds of Deacon Hill is probably more mobile of a quarterback than Iowa's had since at least 2019. Because Spencer Petras was a statue for 3 years, and Cade McNamara was hurt for the first 4 games of 2023. So we're actually going to get a breath of fresh air with this big boy.
And 260 might be difficult to bring down in the pocket, too.
Kirk mentioned that today. Kirk did mention that today. He said, we're not tackling quarterbacks in practice, but, that's one thing that I can see Deacon is a little bit harder to bring down. And that was a facet of Nate Stanley's game that was really impressive. Just his ability to stay on his feet. I mean, you think, the play that first comes to my mind against Ohio State when he's got, I don't even know who the defensive lineman was that was hanging on Nate Stanley's leg. I think it was a future NFL guy, and hanging all over his leg, and he rifles a pass to the back of the end zone to TJ Hawkinson for a touchdown. That's kind of the epitome of what we saw with Nate at times. He did the same thing against Indiana once. He did it against Wisconsin in 2018. So maybe we see a little bit of that out of Deacon Hill. And he does have a cannon for an arm. And he's got a big arm. They did attack the ball downfield. The only reason I'm just like everybody just, and this is almost like it's gotten worse, which it doesn't surprise me, Mark, because I think the world in general has gotten worse in general. But like, it's amazing. Every year it seems like people are more reactionary and more, I don't know, off the cuff. They're just like this panic, either the panic or the anointing of players. It's just so quick now. I've literally heard this year, had somebody called into the show and said that they thought Caleb Johnson, last year after the Purdue game, people were saying that they thought Caleb Johnson was the next Sean Green and he was just going to be, Doak Walker Award candidate. Then Jazz Patterson has his game against Iowa State, and somebody called in and said, I think he's going to be one of the best running backs we've ever seen at Iowa. And then LaShawn Williams goes for 260 yards against Western Michigan, and he's the savior for the offense. So people just, they just jump to conclusions so quickly. I have fans I can't even count on 2 hands, Mark, the number of fans who have said, I actually think Deacon Hill's better than Cade McNamara. What a naive statement. You have every right to your opinion. Now, if we're talking about an injured Cade, sure. But it's almost like we're just so quick to jump to the next thing. And if you look at the numbers from Saturday, that was not a good Michigan State defense. They were 9th or 10th in the conference in most categories, so maybe not as bad as some people thought. That's still not good. But let me find the numbers that I was looking for. How many do you happen to know how many 3-and-outs Iowa had with Deacon Hill at quarterback on Saturday? Did you watch most of the game?
I had the game on, the entire game on. No, I didn't have the entire game on. Anyway, I had the second half on.
Let me just pull this up real quick because
so a few things come to mind. Deacon Hill went 11 of 27. Now, a Caleb Brown drop comes to mind. I'm trying to think of any other. I know that there were a series of dropped passes. At one point, they posted the dropped passes several times on the screen during the broadcast, and I think it reached 6 at one point. So,
yeah. The drops were a problem, so hopefully that gets corrected because that was an issue. But
one or two is acceptable, but 6.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And they were from a number of different guys. Ragaini had a drop. Eric All had a drop. Vines had a couple of drops. Unacceptable. Caleb Brown had a drop. They had it was a beautiful pass from Deacon Hill on I think it was a comeback route to Caleb Brown. I know it's a little bit different when you're out there, but for a former 4+ star receiver, you ought to be able to make that catch. Now, he's not had the ball come to him much. I did have somebody text me on Saturday. Well, now I see why Caleb Brown's not been contributing. Anyways, so I certainly wouldn't attribute it to that. So let's see. They went 8 plays, 53 yards with Deacon Hill. Or excuse me, 8 plays, 53 yards with Cade McNamara to open the game. Cade, they had 3rd and 11 on that second drive. So I'm not gonna give Deacon Hill that 3 and out, but they did go 3 and out on the second drive of the game. Then they went 3 and out again on the 3rd drive of the game, 3 and out on the 4th drive of the game. Then they have a 5-play, 80-yard touchdown on the 5th drive of the game. Then another 3 and out. Then a fumble return for a touchdown on the first play of the next drive. 5 plays resulting in an interception. 4 plays for -5 yards and a field goal. You've seen that one before, Mark. 3 plays for 5 yards, 3 and out. 3 plays for 0 yards, 3 and out. 8 plays for 33 yards and a punt. 7 plays, 20 yards field goal. 6 plays, 14 yards field goal. I mean, those are not good offensive numbers. Those are abysmal. But I can understand. You read between the lines here, and you bring up the drops. You bring up the fact it was his first time out there in real game action. There were certainly some glimmers of hope and some positives to take away. And I honestly, in evaluating Deacon after the game was over, I thought he played okay. I mean, his numbers were poor. I mean, 11 of 27, 4.3 yards per attempt. So those are not good numbers. But again, taking everything into account, I thought he played okay. And we're going to learn a lot more about him on Saturday against a better defense. But they'll have a week to Iowa will have a week to kind of scheme around Deacon's skill set, and hopefully that includes taking some shots down the field because he's got an arm.
And so you say Kirk called this a good team that they're playing on Saturday?
I think so. I don't know. Maybe he didn't say that explicitly. He brought up the challenge of the defense. They were really good in all aspects on Saturday against Illinois.
And I understand that's a different perspective. When you actually have to line up your athletes against their athletes, and these guys are Big Ten football players. So I'm not downplaying it, but they're really not a good football team. They're okay. They're all right.
Know they're not a good football team. How do we know that?
Well, they've played, unlike pretty much everybody in the country, they've actually played a legitimate schedule. Like everyone they've played has been a good football team to some extent. Like is a reasonable.
Not good.
Pardon me?
Virginia Tech is not good.
What I'm saying is they haven't played an FCS. They haven't played a low-level group of 5. They've played all Power 5s and Fresno State.
I give Virginia Tech credit. They won by 3 scores against Pitt on Saturday.
They did.
But the reason I bring it up, Mark, is you're right. They lost to Fresno, lost to Syracuse, and then, of course, lost the game to Wisconsin. But really impressive win against Illinois, beat Virginia Tech. Their record doesn't say they're great, but they're also first-year head coach. And, they appear, at least over the last week, they appear that they're getting better. And that's, you would expect that from a team like Purdue right now.
I didn't see the game against Illinois. It was on the Big Ten Network. I think this was last night. I flipped by it and I watched like 3 plays and saw them complete a long ball downfield. They were down 10-6 in the third quarter and just exploded, just blew out Illinois in the second half. They've got a nice 1-2 combination with Devin Mockabee and Tyrone Tracy, both having really good seasons at running back.
Boy, how about Tyrone Tracy? 112 yards at running back on Saturday. So I give that coaching staff credit because as Jeff Brom, we always kind of label Jeff Brom as an offensive artist. They did a little bit with Tyrone Tracy in the backfield, but maybe this is an indication they didn't do enough. And certainly Iowa didn't do enough with that if this is an indication of his skill set.
Iowa's just a 2.5-point favorite at home against Purdue.
Which means on a neutral field, they'd probably either be even or maybe half-point underdogs.
Yeah.
No, I think I've been impressed. I mean, I haven't seen every Purdue game, but watched much of the Wisconsin Purdue game, and honestly, 38-17. I actually thought Purdue was decent in that game.
Yeah,
Illinois played really good. What's that?
I watched that game. Yeah.
I don't think Purdue played badly in that game, and that was the first real. I mean, Tyrone Tracy had 84 yards in that game, had 10.5 per carry, and a touchdown. So these last 2 weeks, Tracy's been around 200 rushing yards.
All right, folks, we'll take your comments and questions. Of course, the super chats light up the board, so we look at those first and foremost. And we've got Mike here. We appreciate you, Mike 3883. Fire Kirk and Brian. Love the show. They're 4-1.
Well, now you sound like Kirk, Mark.
well, that
They are
is the bottom
4-1.
line of the operation. They are 4-1.
Sure, and they are. Here's the deal: they are 4-1. And if you had asked anybody preseason, anybody that didn't have rosy-colored glasses, their prediction at this point would have been 4-1.
Yeah,
that was my prediction at this point. I'm sure if you had picked a game-by-game schedule, they'd have been 4-1 on your board as well. So, like, I understand there's some frustrations. Offense still hasn't looked very good. They've lost their quarterback. They've lost their tight end. They've been down their two best running backs. There are some concerns, clearly, moving forward. But they're 4-1. And they won by 10 on Saturday, even though the game was extremely close throughout. They're not going to be blowing teams out, Mark. I'll be shocked if they blow almost anybody out. Maybe they'll go to Wrigley and blow out Northwestern, but Northwestern seems to have found a gear and at least some life. Now, they didn't look good in the second half on Saturday, but tested Penn State in the first half. They came off that win against Minnesota. So I think Iowa's going to be tested in almost every game. With that being said, I stand by what we said preseason. The schedule is cake when you compare it to other Power 5 schedules. Every game on their schedule from here on out is winnable. Every single one. The least winnable is at Wisconsin. They'll be underdogs in that game. But every game is winnable from here on out. And they'll be favored in most of those games. With the guy who is
winnable, not meaning they've got a chance. Winnable meaning they should win the game. Except maybe the Wisconsin game.
Yeah, I think Wisconsin's the one exception to that. Obviously, the people in Vegas think that this game Saturday is going to be pretty darn close. But yeah, I think it's fair. The way Minnesota's playing, Iowa's going to be favored over them at home. They'll be favored at Northwestern. I think that Rutgers game at home should be interesting. Rutgers is better than I think people are giving them credit for. Illinois doesn't look good, and Nebraska looks like a mess.
True. Illinois, disappointing season, and Nebraska will give Matt Rule a pass on year number 1. Well, we will find out a little bit more about this Purdue football team and how good or decent or not so good they are. We've got the big time Boiler showing up for us here. Hey, how's it going, man?
Corey, Mark, how we doing?
Doing well. Appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Well, we'll get things started with this big second half against Illinois. Two teams that were, at least by the Vegas odds, considered to be equals. And you would think, based on previous results, that might be the case. And then Purdue just really put down the throttle in the second half, scored 3 consecutive touchdowns to pull away.
Yeah, that was a big game. I mean, going into that game, it was kind of a put up or shut up for Purdue and Illinois, really. Purdue desperately needed that win. It was a big program win, obviously, with Ryan Walters coming from Illinois to beat his old head coach 44 to, put 44 points up on. And I saw a stat that's the most Brett Bielema has gone against him so far. So they've obviously are recruiting similar players, and so that's going to help. But that was definitely the most complete game that Purdue's played so far this season. They've been pretty up and down.
And Grant's here, so I want to segue to Illinois because we want to focus in on this matchup and on Purdue. But Mark, I don't know how to feel about Illinois. We're so reactionary as fans and as college football people, but man, with the corner they seemed to turn last year, and they have not looked good at any point this year. And I don't know. That's strange because I think very highly of Brett Bielema, but I don't know. That Luke Altmaier experiment has not been very good, and I don't know. Will be interesting to see. There are rumors now that perhaps they're going to be making some staff changes here in the near future. So
I have them last in my power rankings. They just beat FAU by 6 points. They needed a 4th down miracle and a last-second field goal to beat Toledo in the opener. They looked awful against Kansas, and then this second half. So we'll turn it over to Corey after I lead into Tyrone Tracy, because I'm sure we're going to head in that direction at some point. 112 yards, 2 really good games the last 2 weeks. Great 1-2 punch with he and Devin Mockabee.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man, Tyron Tracy looks like a legit running back. I think Corey, I heard you mention earlier that, Jeff Brom, they put Tyrone at running back last year, but he was kind of split in time and really didn't use him a whole lot. He had a pretty good carry against Michigan in the Big Ten championship game, but this staff put him at running back full time. Of course, he was a really good running back in high school. He's actually become our starting running back. Devin Maccabee's had some fumbling issues, way too many fumbling issues, but Tyrone, man, he goes between the tackles real strong. He's a strong runner. I made a comment to my brother. This is going to sound crazy, but he actually looks like a legit NFL running back. He scored a touchdown in every game this year. He's got a 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown week 1. He looks like a player. One of our best players in offense for sure.
Ball security. Is his ball security strong?
It is. I mean, surprisingly, he's not fumbled once. Sometimes it kind of feels like he's carrying that thing a little loose, but it's not gone now. Knock on wood, I say that. Yeah. But he's got a tight grip on that thing because
that's the one thing I noticed. I think it was the Wisconsin game, his touchdown run. I'm seeing that ball out here, and I'm thinking, ooh, that thing's going to get ripped.
Yeah.
Now, I have no doubt, Mark, that Tyrone's going to have extra ambition playing this game, and I can tell you, this was not like the Charlie Jones situation. I think there was some hard feelings from Iowa, given kind of the dynamic of what happened with Charlie. And I think that the perception of, well, first of all, there were things that happened with the Purdue coaching staff that Iowa didn't like and how they pursued Charlie. Tyrone was different, and I don't think there was any bad blood on either side, but Tyrone's not going to be happy. I mean, at one point in 2021, there was this idea that he was, the top, maybe one of the top receivers in the conference, and then he hardly got the ball the rest of the year. And I don't blame Tyrone for that. I mean, Iowa's proven that they can't scheme for receivers and wideouts consistently well. So now he did have some drop issues that year, but I give Ryan Walters, this coaching staff, credit because, I mean, here you have a former DC, and you had an offensive genius in Jeff Brom who tinkered with the idea of running Tyrone as a tailback, and now you have a DC take over the program, and he seems to be right where he belongs now at tailback, and that's going to be different. I mean, Kirk was asked about it today, and he said, we saw that at Iowa. We saw his ability to run, but they didn't. You're right. They didn't run him a lot. They ran him a little bit out of Wildcat, I believe, in 2020 with Tyler Goodson, I think Amir Smith-Marset, but I've been impressed with him as well. Hudson Card's an interesting one, Grant, because I don't hear a lot of talk about him. Maybe it's just the team's 2-3. I understand, that people aren't talking about teams that are under 500. But in general, he's been really good. And you think about some of the transfers across this conference, a lot of transfers at quarterback, and we've had some that have completely flopped. Luke Altmaier's not been good. Jeff Sims hasn't been good. Hudson Card has been good for the most part. Can you talk about what he's given Purdue transferring from Texas in the offseason?
Yeah, he's a steady force back there. Quite frankly, I was a little surprised. I was looking up his stats before I got on here, and he's only has 5 throwing touchdowns this year, which I thought was kind of shocking for those that did Deion Burks. But he's got a couple rushing touchdowns. They're running a bit of the or actually more like the read option with Hudson, which has taken him a few games to get down. Quite frankly, he was pretty terrible at it to start the year. He never actually ran himself. He's actually got some pretty good legs, but he's kind of been hesitant to run. That's changed a little bit here recently. But for the most part, he makes the right decisions, doesn't force anything. He's kind of a sort of a game manager that can actually throw the ball, if that makes any sense. But yeah, he's been a revelation to have back there for sure.
I'm hesitant, Mark, and I'll see if you agree with this. I'm hesitant to ever call a guy in college who's in the plus territory in rushing yards, a quarterback, a game manager. I mean, he's got 75 rushing yards in the season. So, that's an indication that, as you said, Grant, the dude can move his legs. And that is something that I'm thinking of past Purdue quarterbacks. When's the last time Purdue had a real mobile quarterback? I mean, we're
probably
talking
Joey Elliott, I would say.
When was that?
That would have been 2009, I want to say, maybe.
Wow. So
right after Curtis Painter.
I know we say that with Iowa, although Iowa had CJ Beathard in 15 and 16, like that's a long time. And I know it's a different coaching staff, different era. So this is going to be a totally different so many different things to look at. Different, obviously, a totally different approach defensively, different personnel, and yet you have the familiar face in Tyrone Tracy. So I'm intrigued by this matchup.
Yeah, we saw Aiden O'Connell get his first NFL start over the weekend. And yeah, this was not a highly publicized transfer portal move as quarterbacks go, even though he played at Texas. I was always impressed with Hudson Card at Texas. As Grant said, he's more mobile than what he's shown this year. I always found him to be a legitimate dual threat quarterback. He's a gamer. If anybody watched last year's Alabama game, he played the entire game after Quinn Ewers got hurt in the first quarter, basically hobbling around on an ankle sprain, and really left the field with a lead. Should have won the game. And I've always been impressed with Hudson Card, and I would think, Grant, that based on what Ryan Walters wants to do, and what type of culture or identity he wants to have with his football team, that Hudson Card's a big part of that, being that style of player and not Aiden O'Connell, where you feel like, well, we need to throw it 40 times to justify this guy's arm.
No, exactly. So there was kind of some questions, what exactly is Purdue's identity on offense? Graham Harrell was hired. Ryan Walters was talking about, running the air raid. So going into the season, that was kind of the question. Even the first couple games, there were still some questions, but I think especially after this second half, kind of that second half of the Wisconsin game, I think the light bulb kind of turned on, and this Illinois game as well, that this is actually a very balanced offense, air raid. I think they're running it in passing about 50-50. They're running nearly, it seemed like last couple games, they put up like 190 yards, Wisconsin and Illinois. They have three pretty good running backs, not terribly deep at receiver, but Hudson Card, he's only throwing for like 220 yards a game. It seems like a lot more, but they're balanced, which I think you said Ryan Walters wants a balanced offense and play an aggressive defense. And a big change that happened, and Iowa fans might be envious of this. We found out that we have a head coach that will actually make some changes. Kevin Kane has been on the field this year calling the defense, actually on the field. So is Graham Harrell. He actually moved them both up to the press box. And Ryan Walters actually called the defense against Illinois, which sometimes that might sound like, fan speak, but that's what they did last year, Illinois. Ryan Walters obviously has a gift for calling defenses. He's done pretty well the last couple stops. And so they went back to the setup that Illinois had last year with Kevin Kane, kind of the eye in the sky, and Ryan actually calling the defense. And there was a big difference on Saturday. It was very aggressive. Thing actually blitzing, which we've not seen so far. So that was as a fan, that was pretty exciting, and also exciting that a young coaching staff will actually make changes when needed.
The one thing as I'm kind of scrolling here through stats through 5 games, Purdue, one thing Purdue has not had, and I know this is just the tendency of all of us, especially as Iowa fans, because this is a program Iowa has struggled to beat. Obviously won last year in West Lafayette, kind of got the last laugh against Coach Brom, but in general, Coach Brom had Iowa's number. So this is a totally different series, totally different rivalry, if you want to call that now. But you can't help but look back at the history of this series and think traditionally, at least under the Kirk era and Jeff Brom era, you had at least one receiver that would go off. Whether you're talking Rondell Moore actually wasn't on that list, but David Bell or Mahungu, or just go down the list. And Purdue traditionally struggled to run the football. Is that totally, for us Iowa fans that haven't seen a lot of football in West Lafayette this year, is that totally different? Obviously there's some personnel leftovers from the Brom era, or is there a guy you could see going off at wideout this week?
Deion Burks is a freak. He's kind of a bigger version of Rondell Moore. He's not quite as fast, but he's the fastest player on the team. They're making an emphasis of giving him the ball. He's got 4 touchdowns on the year. They're starting to actually give him the ball kind of on, in the backfield a little bit, kind of getting creative a little bit with actually getting the ball. He's kind of your go-to receiver, but yeah, they don't have a ton of, deep threats per se. Again, they're more balanced. They're actually going to try to run the ball. They're not going 5 wide. Usually it's only 3 wide receivers on the field, 1 tight end or 2 tight end. And a big injury too just happened. Max Clare, who's been our starting tight end, looked very impressive. Had some sort of injury kind of a freak injury last week, and he's going to be out for the year, it sounds like. So it's kind of a big loss for us. But Garrett Miller will be the starting tight end, who's coming off an injury himself, but he's kind of back to health.
Well, both these teams will have injuries because Iowa's down their top tight end, down the quarterback, down at least one running back. It sounds like, Mark, maybe Caleb Johnson makes it back this week. He's been putting in some work, but Jazz Patterson will remain out. One thing I just, again, perusing through stats that jumped out off the stat sheet to me is Purdue's been really good on critical downs, specifically on third down. I think they're around 45% on the year. Iowa's worst in the conference, not even close, at 27%. So, if you run the ball effectively, obviously that's going to be able to set up more manageable third downs. And so Tyrone Tracy's going to be a big storyline in this game. If they get behind, obviously cough up the football, it can totally change the game. But if you're getting chunk plays, it's going to be hard for a lot of teams have been nickel and diming Iowa to death this year. And defensively, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but my guess is Iowa hasn't been quite as good on third down defense this year. So that could be a big time stat to follow.
Yeah, and that kind of changed recently because Purdue started out the year horrendously on third down against Fresno State. And part of the reason was, starting that first game, we were down to our third string center who had just joined the team from Colorado like 3 weeks before that. So had we even had our backup center, we probably would have beat Fresno State because we were really struggled running the ball. Then our starting center, all Big Ten, Gus Hartwick came back week 3, and that's made a huge difference. He's kind of back to healthy too. So you've kind of seen that improvement here the last couple of weeks.
And correct me if I'm wrong, King Doru is out for the year.
He's actually at Cal. He transferred.
Oh, he transferred. I was going to. Is he doing anything?
I don't think so. He's one of the 40 players that transferred or got cut. Basically, we're kind of a mini Colorado situation over here at Purdue that kind of went unnoticed.
I was just about to say I didn't know that Colorado actually lost players. I was surprised to hear that. They actually lost.
Yeah, we brought in 20 transfers ourselves and 20 freshmen and cut 30 players. Some went on their own and some just Ryan Walters and company axed.
Grant, I don't know if this is where you were with this football team to start the season, but considering there's a lot of respect for Jeff Brom, Aiden O'Connell, Charlie Jones, etc., Payne Durham, etc., that people were not projecting this team to be a contender in this division. But if you I don't want to oversell a second half against Illinois as changing a narrative in the division. But if you look at every other team outside of Northwestern that has had a significant upgrade from what we thought they were, but they needed a mammoth upgrade from what people considered what they would be this year. Every other team in the division, from my perspective, is worse or has given us a worse indication of what they should be this season than what was projected preseason, except for Purdue. So do you have any thoughts about this team possibly challenging in this division? They're only a 2.5 point underdog on the road against a team that is kind of the co-favorite.
Well, to answer all that, Mark, kind of going back to, to Jeff Brom after he left and stuff. I mean, even if Jeff Brom had stayed, he was going to have to do a ton of work in the portal, as we saw in that LSU game where we just got absolutely throttled in the bowl game. So even with the schedule that we had, obviously with Ohio State and Michigan on it, we thought even with Jeff Brom, a bowl game would be the goal. Ryan Walters comes in, does the portal, 6-6 to most Purdue fans would have been absolutely incredible. That's kind of where I was at. I thought maybe they could get 7 wins. They kind of start off kind of slow. Virginia Tech, they looked okay, but Virginia Tech was terrible. That also was like a 6-hour delay game. So just to get that win was nice. Then the Syracuse, and they didn't have a turnover either the first 2 games. And then Syracuse happens. We just cough up the ball like crazy. It was a better of a game than kind of the score anticipated, but Purdue should have been in there a little bit better. Wisconsin first half was terrible. And then the Illinois game happens. And again, most of us fans were kind of like, and we didn't want to get a game at home yet. And then the Illinois game happened. That was, again, put up or shut up. And they really showed out. And so, and as you said, the Big Ten West is pretty atrocious. And I don't even know who the favorite is at this point. Possibly Wisconsin, maybe Iowa. But yeah, seeing these other teams, I don't know if Purdue's going to go to Indy, but I like their chances a lot better now than I did a week ago.
First of all, let me push back a little bit on you, Mark. And just so you're aware, I was drumming up in the last few days. I had some criticisms of you, and we can save those for another show, Mark. But
Me?
oh yes,
Let's hear them.
Strong criticisms. I think you've been a little hard on Iowa in general. You've been taking shots at Iowa on social media. You've been summoning Iowa into your debate with Notre Dame fans. You brought up the change at offensive coordinator at Indiana over the last few days, like you're breaking some news to Iowa fans. You seem like you're kind of being a little bit opportunistic with Iowa fans' pain. So I understand that to an extent. In response to your comment a few minutes ago that Purdue's the only team in the West that have exceeded expectations, I would challenge that to an extent because I don't think anybody expected anything from Northwestern. As of right now, Northwestern.
I mentioned Northwestern.
Oh, you did mention?
I put them on the side as
okay.
A mammoth. I think I used the term mammoth, significant upgrade from what we expected.
Okay, and I would say the same thing about Iowa and Wisconsin. The verdict is still out on both those teams. I don't think either of those teams have underachieved.
Yeah, the verdict's out on everyone.
Well, but I'm just saying neither of those teams have any losses that we didn't expect them to have. I mean, Wisconsin lost at Washington State. I mean, I predicted Wisconsin win that game, but 3-1 at this point in the season, 4-1 for Iowa. I think those are records that we expected.
Yeah, I'm evaluating the level of play more so than just the record.
Sure.
You know, Michigan State's not shown to be very good at all.
Well, that's true. They looked better on Saturday, Mark.
They were playing Iowa.
Listen, I understand. I'm simply saying if you watch the game, they looked more inspired. Now, part of that is you're right. You play Iowa, you let a team stick around. But I think my guess is at some point, I don't think they just based on what I saw on Saturday, they're not just going to throw in the towel and be a total mess the rest of the year. Now that the Mel Tucker thing is behind them, and by the way, I am wearing my Sparty shirt. Now that the Mel Tucker thing is behind them to an extent, maybe they start playing better because they have talent on that team. There is talent. Mel Tucker has recruited decently well at Michigan State. So there is talent on that football team right now.
You're going to turn our Iowa contingent against me. I actually had somebody comment to me yesterday that said, if anything, I give Iowa a pass and I'm very good to Iowa, considering a lot of the things that I could take shots at. I actually had somebody call and tell me that.
You just make fun. You make fun of Iowa.
I do not make fun of Iowa.
You make fun of Iowa.
I have great respect for Iowa football.
And you make fun of them.
I make fun of this ridiculous offense and that it just continues on and on and on and on.
I know.
I'm not making that's not a knock at the fan base, the institution. That's a knock on Kirk Ferentz and his son. And I guess Gary Barta, but he's gone, and now
you can't blame Beth Getz,
the new athletic director. No, I can't. No.
So,
but
yeah, that's fair.
But if Indiana is firing their offensive coordinator and they're performing better on offense, and they should have lower expectations than Iowa, should they not?
Did you see my response?
No.
Do you? Okay, so I simply made a comment. I said big difference with what you're talking about because really there's no B. The big problem with your premise there is Tom Allen's on the hot seat. Kirk Ferentz is nowhere near the hot seat. So obviously head coaches are going to act with a level of urgency when their own jobs are at stake. If Kirk Ferentz's job was legitimately at stake, which would be basically in a different reality, we can't even imagine that situation given his record and how long he's been here. We wouldn't be in this situation is what I'm saying. You can't expect, you can't anticipate Iowa's Kirk Ferentz is going to make a move like that given his job security. That's all I'm saying. Whether he should or he shouldn't. We had this conversation last year. Rutgers did the same thing. There were programs across the country that had better offenses than Iowa and made changes. But in most cases, those head coaches were feeling heat. And rightfully so. And the other difference is Indiana's not winning games. Iowa's winning games. Right? Rutgers was not winning games. UMass was not winning games. Like these programs that were having awful offensive performances, they were losing. Iowa's an exception because they find ways to win games in spite of the offense. So that's what makes this.
Man, you're sounding like Kirk now. You're usually on here on the side of the evaluation should be about the offense and not the total product.
And I'm saying what gives Kirk the power to double down and to not make changes is the win column. I mean, that's what he's banked himself on. That's what his bread and butter is. We won
In a
8 games.
sense,
We won 9 games.
it should empower him to do what's going to be best for the program.
It could go either way, right? He has a choice because of the fan base and the loyalty and his tenure here. He can either use that to empower him to make changes to achieve greatness, or he can he can use that to continue in this cycle of offense, and that's what he's chosen to do to this point.
No, there's a lot of things I think nationally from people in other parts of the country that make fun of not just Iowa, all sorts of different football programs from different locales that I don't take part in because I don't believe in them. But this is a different deal. This could be going on anywhere. And I would be poking.
For the record, I did not watch the segment, but somebody told me that I guess Pat McAfee and his team made fun of Iowa here recently in the Iowa offense. So it's still like, you're right about one thing. The Iowa offense has not looked as good as I thought it would look. I mean, I thought just based on the upgrade at quarterback, the numbers would be better. But we didn't anticipate Cade being hampered. What I have accepted now that Cade's done, there's no chance he gets better. Cade's done for the year. Now that that's a total realization, I have reason to believe that every game from here on out is going to be close. Like I don't anticipate the Iowa offensive numbers get much of any better. Maybe they get slightly better, but we're going to be looking at an offense that's 115 plus in total offense at the end of the year. Yeah, and they're down there in a lot of categories. Just for the record, are they last in the FBS right now in total offense, Mark?
I don't know. Somebody needs to inform Brian that there are no other places to drop to. That's pretty much it.
They did no favors, with that 25 points a game thing. That just made that a national laughing stock.
Yes,
that drives 25.
And that came from Gary Barta, correct?
That came from Gary Barta. Yes.
Why did Kirk not step in and say, no, we're not announcing this. This is not.
I believe, based on what I've been told, it was actually the Brian Kirk side that wanted it public because there was very little faith in Gary Barta to abide by those stipulations. So that's what I've been told from behind closed doors, even though it's a stupid, I think it's a stupid criteria. I agree with both of you. I think they wanted it public so that Gary Barta would have to be held to his expectations were, which were erroneous regardless of how you look at it. By the way, I've just pulled it up here. Iowa right now is 130th out of 130 teams in the FBS in total offense. And here's what's crazy. It's not even close. We said that. We said it last year. But Mark, again, listen to the other team. This is exactly the conversation we had a year ago. Listen to the other teams that are down there. Eastern Michigan, Kent State, Nevada. Utah's an exception. What's Utah's record right now?
4-1.
Okay, so they're an exception.
Utah's down there?
They are 126th in the country in total.
They are playing with a third string quarterback. They're third string quarterback. They are playing with a third string quarterback.
I was playing with Wisconsin's third string quarterback from last year.
Yeah, now they are.
Well, the first 4 weeks they were playing. They were playing with a
slightly injured quarterback. Okay,
slightly
injured to some degree. He was able to play.
Probably should have been.
We'll get back to big time boiler. You may want to look at the Utah schedule though, too. So there's a difference there. UCLA, Florida.
In general, most of those teams that are down near Iowa have bad records.
Yeah.
Iowa's 4-1 with the worst total offensive numbers in the country. So that's just what Iowa does.
Anything else for Grant?
I was just saying, I do have some good positive news for you Iowa fans. Purdue has this curse of playing backup quarterbacks. Whenever they get their first full start, they look like Heisman candidates. Going back, I remember the early 2000s was when Notre Dame rolled out some guy named Garrett Godson or something like that. It was a tight end that started quarterback and just lit up Purdue, and even Rocky Lombardi from Michigan State. There's another name that looked like a Heisman player when Purdue played him. So there's others. So I wouldn't be surprised if Deacon Hill looks amazing tomorrow, Saturday, just based off of Purdue history.
By the way, I don't know, South Bend Hawkeye in the chat. Appreciate his comment. Deacon Hill was not a 4-star coming out of high school. I don't even know what he had. Let me find his recruiting page just so we can. By the way, I'll be posting. I had a conversation with Deacon Hill's high school coach back in, I think it was January, on a live show, and never really promoted it or anything like that because it was, we're talking about the backup quarterback. But it was an insightful conversation. I'm going to be reposting that this evening, kind of give Iowa fans an idea of this kid's background and just his skill set. He does have a big arm. For anybody that didn't watch, if you're a Purdue fan watching this show,
Can he run? Because Purdue's really struggled against quarterbacks that actually can run this year. Like really struggled mightily.
Let's just say he's 6'3", 260 pounds, Grant.
Okay. I mean, Garrett Schrader's a big boy. He ran all over Purdue.
Yeah. I don't think you're going to be seeing any QB draws from Deacon Hill. Now,
that's advantage Purdue.
He's more mobile than an injured Cade McNamara. And I think that's how a lot of Iowa fans are approaching this. He's more mobile than what Cade was with the quad injury. Rivals had Deacon Hill coming out of high school as, let's see, where's their star rating? 3-star. And On3 had him as, the On3 wasn't even around back then. Industry rating for On3, 3-star. Yeah, I don't think he was a 4-star by anybody. I'd be shocked. 247 had him as a 3-star as well. Oh, I'm sorry. 247 had him as a 4-star. 247 has everybody as a 4-star. How many 4-stars do they hand out every year?
Quite a few.
So about 450.
He was the 680th.
Oh,
no, I'm sorry. That was his transfer rating. Let me grab his overall in the class of 2021. Deacon Hill was considered, according to the 247 Sports Composite, the 493rd best player in the country, 39th best player in that class.
Was any read option run against Michigan State?
No.
Okay, because that's been Purdue's Achilles heel, and I'd be curious if Brian Ferentz reads any tape or watches any tape. If they pull that out, Purdue might struggle because they would not stop the read option.
I would love to be able to come on here, Grant, and have you every year and say, better watch out for this, better watch out for that. And Mark, you and I would love to be able to talk about the different things you might be able, the wrinkles you throw. Like, hey, in an ideal world, and even Kirk said they've talked about it today, in an ideal world, Grant, maybe Cooper DeJean takes some Wildcat snaps. He played quarterback in high school. He's the fastest guy on the team. He's an incredible playmaker, but that's not how Iowa thinks. And Kirk brought that up today. They're more concerned with limiting the number of snaps for one of their best defensive players and not putting him in harm's way because he's already getting all these snaps on defense, on special teams. To his point, they have been, and I don't know the stats to back this up, but they have been one of the worst teams in the country, maybe the worst. I bet you the defense, Mark, in 5 games has been on the field for more snaps than any other FBS team in the country. That would be a stat. I'd love to be able to find that stat. They were on the field 97 snaps against Penn State a couple weeks ago. And even like back at the Iowa State game, they got killed in time of possession and in total snaps. The defense has been on the field the whole game. So it is a fair point that Cooper DeJean's already on the field a lot, and he's on the field for every punt return of the game. So, but, I don't think anybody's asking for Iowa to throw, 10, 20 plays for Cooper DeJean during a game, but you have a package ready. Iowa has run Wildcat in past seasons. I would love to be able to talk to Brian. If we get media availability with Brian one of these Wednesdays, I'm going to ask him what happened to the Wildcat offense. Not that it was great or dynamic, but they ran a lot of it in 2020, and then it totally disappeared. It's kind of like the special teams trick plays from 17, 18, and 19. Totally disappeared. We haven't seen them again.
College football stats, 8 teams have been on the field defensively more than Iowa for more plays. Only 8.
Who are the 8 teams? Can you run through them real quick? How'd you find that so fast?
CFB stats. Notre Dame, who's played 1 more game, so forget them. So they're out. Ole Miss, Old Dominion, Florida International, which I believe played a
gauntlet.
No, okay. 2 of these teams, 3 of these teams have played 6 games. So forget them. Forget Notre Dame, Vandy, and San Diego State. The others are Ole Miss, Old Dominion, FIU, Texas State.
Well, Texas State beat Baylor. What's going on with Ole Miss?
They won 64-50. What was the score?
Well, so they're scoring a lot of.
55-49. Yeah.
So they're scoring a lot of points. So that's why their offense isn't on the field. They're having big plays down the field. At Iowa, it's because you're going 3 and out. But that's a fair that's a fair point, I guess. But so second among all Power 5, second worst among all Power 5 schools in most number of snaps in the first 5 games.
They've also played a pretty rough schedule thus far. Tulane, Alabama, LSU, Georgia Tech.
Yeah. And by the way, Cooper DeJean, the idea of him running him in a Wildcat package, I mean, you could even speculate on the idea of Iowa. You brought up maybe Purdue's struggles with defending a mobile quarterback. Joe Labus did start and play the entirety of the Kentucky Music City Bowl last year. So, he's the backup now. He's 1 snap away. I think it's pretty clear Iowa doesn't have a whole lot of confidence in him. And regardless of the lip service from the coaching staff and from Kirk, I don't think they have a lot of confidence in Joe Labus. There's a reason why a first-year guy in Deacon Hill leapfrogged him during spring practice. But if they want to get dicey and they want to confuse things and maybe throw in a wrinkle, maybe you bring in Joe Labus for some QB draw stuff if you feel like he can protect the football, because he is mobile. He is more of a dual threat, much more of a dual threat than Deacon is. So that's boy, there's so many things that I'm no offensive guru, no offensive coach, Mark, but if I had any say in what happened on game day, I'd be saying, hey, let's experiment with this. Let's experiment with that. That's just not how Iowa operates, as we all know.
Grant, we appreciate you being here. Corey, did you have anything else?
No, Grant, feel free. I don't know what your schedule is Saturday. Feel free to jump on the post-game show for a few minutes if you have time. Would love to get your
will do. Appreciate you guys having me. And I really look forward to this game. I kind of have the same expectations I had going to the Illinois game. Not much. It's kind of a barometer test, if you will, for this Purdue team. It sounds like, for Iowa as well. So
Big Time Boiler. It's right here on YouTube. Check it out, everyone. And you can follow Grant, as you see right there, Big Time Boiler on Twitter. Thanks, Grant. Enjoy the game.
Thanks, guys.
All right. We have come to the conclusion of another sterling Iowa Hawkeyes Live for number 114 with Corey and myself. It's every Tuesday, folks. Got a nice crowd in here. Folks, bring it on back next Tuesday. And you can, of course, watch what you missed. So many of you, jumping in here in the last 10 or 15 minutes. So make it on back next week, 4:30 Central. And also keep in mind, you can watch the entirety of the show right now. What's going on there at I need to post a video, I guess. I'm going to make an apology to the University of Iowa.
That actually probably gets some views, Mark. We've got some. I don't know when the next live show is. We obviously got a post game show Saturday after the Purdue game. I'll be posting that segment with Deacon Hill's high school coach JT Stone here later today, so people can stay tuned for that. I'll have my preview dropping probably tomorrow, my picks, all that good stuff, kind of weekly features on the channel. And we'll also be having Jalen Watson, Iowa 2024 commit, a future DB at Iowa. Have him on the show here in the coming days. His uncle is one of the all-time greats of the Kirk Ferentz era, so I won't spoil who that is, but Jalen was a good interview. Talked to him the other day, and we'll be dropping a podcast with him here coming up. So be sure to tune in. And by the way, South Bend Hawkeye in the chat. I don't know why he said this. Corey, is Grant worse than Levi? I love Grant. Grant's a great. He's a Boiler guy. He's a Boiler fan, but he knows this stuff. Not that I don't like Levi. This idea that I don't like Levi Stevenson is totally erroneous. I have a good relationship with Levi. I mean, we're not going to be kicking back beers anytime soon, Mark, but we have a good relationship.
He picks on the Hawkeyes maybe a little less than I do. Levi.
Really? A little bit less, really. By the
All
way,
right.
how about the Cyclones in that first half? They were hanging around Oklahoma for much of that first half. It's not for that block punt. I mean, obviously the game got out of control, but 50-20, not necessarily an indication of how well they competed in that first. I was actually impressed. I think they're going to beat TCU this weekend. I think they'll beat Baylor. I think they get to bowl eligibility. I really do. Now we'll see. I'm not guaranteeing anything, but they've won 2 games right now. I think they'll get to bowl eligibility. The Big 12 their schedule is not very difficult.
No, not at all. All right, everyone. Appreciate you being here. Next Tuesday, 4:30 Central, right here. And, of course, after the Hawkeyes and the Boilers play, join Corey either here or at From the Hawkeye of the Storm after the game.